This podcast includes information provided by the issuer and does not express the views of the interviewer. This podcast may also include forward-looking statements by the issuer that involve certain risks and uncertainties to its business. Because forward-looking statements are subject to risks and uncertainties, the issuer's actual results could differ from those indicated in this podcast. Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and thank you all so much for the support and for tuning in. You can follow Planet MicroCap on Twitter at Bobby K. Kraft. That's BOBBYKKRAFT, and you are listening to episode 52. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to tweet at me or shoot me an email at rkraft@snnwire.com. And when you do get a chance, if you like what you hear, please rate and review Planet MicroCap on iTunes. It really helps provide feedback for me and spread the MicroCap message. For this episode of the Planet MicroCap Podcast, I spoke with Michael Liu. He is a private investor who has the distinct honor of being the youngest member of the MicroCap Club. I met Michael at last year's MicroCap Leadership Summit and thought it was really cool that not only was he 16 years old, already investing in MicroCap stocks, but he was also doing this type of due diligence. This podcast is all about educating the next generation of investors how to invest in microcap stocks. Michael is part of that next generation of investors. In this interview, he'll outline how he got started investing in microcaps, his investing strategy, and how he balanced that with his other obligations. Thank you again for tuning into episode 52 of the Planet MicroCap Podcast. Please enjoy my interview with Michael Liu, but first, a word from our sponsor.
A comprehensive streaming of market data, research, and portfolio management application for you. QuoteStream is a real-time streaming quotes and research system designed for the day trader, retail investor, institutional investor, both new and old. QuoteStream offers low latency, tick-by-tick data, advanced charting, comprehensive technical analysis, news, and research. With no software to install and no servers to maintain, QuoteStream is the ideal solution for you. Go to stocknewsnow.com and start your free 7-day trial. Click the QuoteStream banner in the header or real-time quotes in the nav bar to get started building and managing your investments.
For this episode of the Planet MicroCap Podcast, I have Michael Liu on the program. He is a private investor and the youngest member of the MicroCap Club. Michael, welcome to the Planet MicroCap Podcast.
Hi, Bobby. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on, and really thank you for joining me. I know it's been a busy schedule for you at the beginning of your first year of college, so I'm excited to have you on.
Right. Definitely excited to be here.
Yes. So as we do with every interview that we have on the podcast, let's start with your background. Tell me a little bit about yourself. The floor is yours.
So like you said, I'm a MicroCap Club member. I contribute to Seeking Alpha. It's probably most interesting is I'm actually 17, and I just moved into college. I'm starting college as a freshman this year. I actually just moved in today, attending Rutgers University, so I'm excited about that. I've been investing for about 5 years now, spending like the last 3 in microcaps. I guess you could say I'm a full-time microcap investor, but I don't think that actually counts as what the other people on your podcast actually do.
I'm going to have to go to Ian and Mike for a judge's ruling on that. So, Michael, as you said, you've been investing for about 5 years now. Have your investments helped pay for college? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I've really only been investing like real money, I guess, for I think around 3 years now. And honestly, like my view has never been that like I'm trying to build wealth in order to pay for college. College is obviously a looming expense for me, as it is for like a lot of other kids around the world, I'd imagine, especially everybody, or like definitely people interested in investing. But in my opinion, I've grown my money a little bit, and it's definitely helped to pay for college. Except I think in the long term, I guess I have a really like big passion for investing, right? And my focus has always been on building knowledge for the rest of my life. My investing career isn't At least I hope it isn't concentrated only in the last 3 years of my high school. But so yeah, I mean, like having that knowledge for the rest of my life and like possibly building a career off of this, I think is a lot more valuable. And especially like compounding wealth for the next like 50 years instead of like the past 5 years, I think is going to be a lot more valuable. So I think even though like college is one expense for a lot of kids out there, I'm still investing my money right now. It's actually in an IRA, so it's protected. But my passion for investing, it goes like it's going to go for the rest of my life. So it's not just to pay for college, even though investing has helped a little bit with that.
How and why did you start investing in general, and then the move to MicroCaps?
Right. So I pretty much got started when I was in 8th grade. We actually had a school-wide stock market game, and at that point, I didn't really know what stocks were. I thought they were kind of lines on a graph that you had to predict or something like that, which I guess is true in the general sense. But so I got really into the game, but everybody in the school was really into it. I actually wound up in, I think, 3rd place. I was investing in like Netflix and I don't even know, Apple back then. I really should have just kept those because like everything else I did after that wasn't really that good. But I got really, really into it. And then I kind of stuck at it after 8th grade. All my friends kind of like, kids lose interest fast. But for some reason, I don't really know why, I kept being interested in it. And I kind of developed it through high school, and especially up until my sophomore year. So when I was 14 or 15. I had just been trading on the website that we were using for the game in 8th grade. It was Investopedia, just paper trading kind of for fun. But sophomore year was when I really started doing some like real company due diligence, looking into like financials, valuation, things like that. I listened to a lot of interviews from Warren Buffett. At that point, I think he shaped a lot of my ideas, and I think that goes for a lot of people that are getting started. And I opened an account later that year, and then that's when I really started getting into microcap stocks, because I think the initial transition I made was realizing like the kinds of returns you could get in microcaps, and that was what really drew me to the space. I had read a lot of like articles online by various microcap investors, like big microcap investors nowadays, that and then I looked at some of their track records, and like they were just absolutely amazing returns I've never gotten in the large cap space. But that kind of attracted me to this space. But as I kept looking in, I found all these other things that I think every microcap investor would now say is really the reason that they keep at it. It's like the first of all, like how small the company is, there's less variables for you to analyze. And the bet becomes a lot more streamlined on one like niche development. Like for example, like a lot of microcap companies, like a $10 million company, it's one industry, one management team, one really streamlined investment thesis. Whereas big companies like I don't know, like GE, it's a conglomerate. They have like billions of business units, and to value every single one, to look at that, it's impossible. So when you're investing in stuff like that, like I didn't even know to begin with how to analyze GE, but with a microcap company, like a really small niche industry, it's easier to craft a thesis. And at the same time, like there's so many more opportunities. Like I really wanted to get into investing, but in large caps, you can't call like Tim Cook and say, hey Tim, I got a few questions about Apple's next growth strategy. Could I talk to you for 5 minutes? Doesn't really work like that. But with microcaps, that's literally how it works, and I was amazed when I found that out. And when I started like going to conferences and these things, I was amazed at the opportunities that were out there, even for like a high schooler that I was, that was just starting out and knew nothing.
I just got to know. I mean, you're pretty young. I guess if it was the last 3 years with real money, so you're about 14. I mean, did your parents help you open your first account, or did you do it all on your own? How did that work?
Yeah, so I actually had gotten a job, and then I realized that there were So before I say that, you can't open a regular brokerage account if you're not 18 by yourself. Mm-hmm. So my parents had to help me open an account. What I have right now is a Roth IRA for minors. through Fidelity. So that was just the platform that my parents were using a few years ago. So it was easy to transition and make a custodial account for me. And that's one of the ways that you can still invest your own money even if you're not 18 yet. And I mean, there's a lot of other like the methods to do this. I think there's UGMA and UTMA, which are kind of like again like custodial accounts, but it's not an IRA, so you don't have to put money that you earned into it. There's like trusts. I think one of my good friends has like this trust that his grandparents left him or something that he invests. So there's a bunch of different ways to do this, and like honestly, like even though the most straightforward way, opening up an individual brokerage account, you need to be 18. You know, there's a lot of ways around that, and they try to make it so like there's definitely an opportunity if you just search around a little bit, even if you're pretty young, to open up a real account with trading real money. And I mean, later on, like I hope to obviously open my own account. I think Fidelity is great, but to do some of those more complex trades, like not just straight equity and things like that, I think Interactive Brokers is definitely one of the best platforms out there. I mean, I haven't done like deep due diligence, but it carries a really good reputation. So,
I mean, did your friends know? I mean, or were you kind of like, this was like your secret hobby that like, you know, I don't know, like how was it for you? I mean, did you bring your friends into the mix a little bit, or were you kind of just like doing your own thing?
I actually always wanted like some of my friends to do it. Like I would tell them like, hey, you should check out investing. This is pretty cool. And they'd go like, yeah. Remember in 8th grade when we had that game, you know, I actually wound up in 10th place. And I was like, well, you know, but you should actually like look into the actual financials and stuff like that. And they're like, their eyes just kind of glazed over at that point. So yeah, but I mean, I'm always like looking for other young people to, you know, talk to. I mean, any investor to like talk to about investing. I kind of like it, but you know, my friends weren't too interested.
Right.
Unfortunately. Well,
you know what? Now that you're in college, I'm sure there will be a couple of business clubs that you'll definitely find a few like-minded individuals like yourself. It's funny that you came about into investing or really doing your deeper due diligence by looking at a microcap stock. But it's interesting that you took the next step to say, well, you know, large caps, I don't really learn as much as I could learn than when I looked at a microcap stock, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, I mean, of course, like I had honestly no idea what I was doing when I was looking at large caps. You know, like basically like the investment thesis for large cap is predicated on all these like macro developments and things like that, and like everything's almost completely efficient. It's really hard to find inefficiencies. I mean, harder, in my opinion, to find inefficiencies in the large cap space. So like, you know, you find something trading at a low PE ratio that like if something's trading at like a PE of 5, that pretty much means it's about to like plummet, because nothing is that cheap sustainably in the large cap space. You know, but in the small cap or in like the microcap market and things like that, you can find things trading at like, you know, 5 times earnings that are sustainable businesses that can grow for a long time. And I think it's the opportunity to find things like that really attracted me.
Mm-hmm. So you touched on this a little bit already, you know, when you said that you started watching a couple Warren Buffett interviews, you know, but what were some of the other things that you used to learn about microcap investing as a high school student?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, my high school specifically, I don't know if this pertains to other high schools, but my high school didn't really have anything for like any sort of investment related curriculum. You know, the most there was an accounting class, but it wasn't even really in depth or anything like that. So what I did really, and I guess this is kind of just how I did it. I mean, other people can do it like any other way, but what I did was I learned a lot of the stuff, you know, by myself, and I don't know. I think most of the stuff I learned, I think one of the biggest places I learned from was actually Seeking Alpha. Mm. I started writing there later, but before I would just read all the articles, and it was really valuable seeing other people's due diligence, and at the same time being able to see like how how it turned out later. Like you could see what a person said would happen, and then what happened, and then you could. It's a good way to get like a bunch of case studies going and seeing what works and what doesn't. And then there's also like as I got into microcaps, I figured out you could do all these things like I was saying, like interview management teams, go to conferences, things like that, and I found those like incredibly invaluable to learning like how the industry works, how other people do their due diligence, just talking to other people, like you never be afraid to just like start a conversation with somebody that you admire and say, hey, I really like your ideas and I really like this, would you be willing to chat at some point? And the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to ignore you, which a lot of people have done to me, but that shouldn't faze you, I guess, because if you're trying to grow, like I'm really trying to grow in the industry, and like this is, for now at least, I'm almost certain this is going to be the rest of my life. So
right. So literally you on your own knew that like, okay, I'm looking at this microcap stock, it's kind of interesting. I want to do some deeper due diligence. I'm just going to get on the phone and call the CEO and see what and ask him a few questions. You just knew to do that on your own?
No.
Okay, all right.
I thought some weird like security FBI or whatever would come to my house if I did that. But it was actually after I think this is the end of sophomore year. I went to my first conference. It was Sidoti, and I saw you could just like randomly schedule meetings with management. I didn't really know what that meant exactly, so I just scheduled one with this random company, and then as soon as I went there, I was sitting face to face with the CEO of this company, and I was like, wait, I didn't realize I could actually do this. And then like I started reading these articles about like oh, I just got off the phone, like on MicroCapClub and things like that. People would say like, oh, I just got off the phone with the CEO, and like these are my notes from the conversation. And I was like, wait, I can do that? So then like all these things started hitting me that like this is an industry where anybody can play, a high school student, $100 million fund manager, they're on an equal playing field. And all the CEOs and like all the management teams that I've interviewed, none of them care really that I'm a young kid, that like it doesn't even seem to affect my credibility, which is really useful because like then you can like have these like legitimate conversations and like do your own due diligence, and like you have access essentially to the same research materials as anybody else in the industry.
Right. I was just going to ask, what was that first meeting like?
I sat down, and then the company was a payment processing company. And I had prepared a few questions, so I wasn't there like completely empty-handed. But they actually got very, very excited. He said this is probably gonna be his most interesting meeting of the day. I think they were really bored at that point because they had talked to so many other investors. Like I sat down and they were like, "You look young. Are you a business student or something like that?" And I said, "No, I'm actually in high school." And then they really brightened up, and they thought it was really funny. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. I mean, but it seems like you hit on something that like a lot of people are afraid of at first. When it comes to talking with management, like you knew to be prepared, you knew to have some questions. I mean, I've asked that time and time again on the podcast. Like how do you approach talking with management? And it seemed like you also knew like, okay, I know that I have to establish some credibility, and they're not just going to answer my question. They're not just going to have a conversation with me. I got to go in prepared, know a little bit about the company, and really bring some substance to this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at that point, I was really conscious that I didn't want to be wasting their time. So, I had prepared a lot, and like I'd researched the company a lot. And I think that's important when you're talking to any management team, is to have research done beforehand. Otherwise, they're just gonna spew whatever they spew, and every management team can make their company sound good because anyone can do that.
What is your investing strategy? How do you approach investing in microcap companies?
Yeah, I think the way I do it, I guess a little bit differently than everybody else, is I put a very heavy emphasis on like the insider dynamics of a company. So that's like management ownership, insider buying, compensation, everything like that, because I think a lot of people say a lot that like, microcap companies, another thing that makes them special is that their management teams drive a lot more of the investment thesis than with like big cap companies. Because like, Warren Buffett has said, I think it's like, I want a company that even a monkey can manage. But that's pertinent to large cap stocks, but I don't think it's as applicable to microcaps because, the CEO, they wear a lot of hats, they do a lot of stuff. They're a very, very big portion of the company. Whereas in a big cap company, there's so much bureaucracy that the value of their job kind of dwindles. But so I pay a lot of attention to like the insider dynamics. That's like kind of the incentives driving management to do well. And I really like this idea that you want a management team that's paid a little bit and owns a lot and is still buying. So essentially, like their wealth from the company is going to, and this idea is, I think, originally put out by Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1. I'm not sure if that was the first instance, but that's where I heard of it. But the idea there is that because they're paid a little and they own a lot of stock, the way they generate their wealth is by growing the company. Mm-hmm. And then, like if they're buying stock on the open market, that just means that in the immediate term, at least, they see potential for growth because, Peter Lynch also says, like, insiders only buy for one reason. They think the stock's going to go up.
Right.
So that's really, like, the crux of my investment strategy. That's actually one of the main screens I use to find stocks. And I found it successful, I guess. In my very brief time investing, I found it successful. But, I mean, in my opinion, like, I would never be comfortable owning a stock that management doesn't own and buying while management isn't buying because, I mean, obviously I'm missing a lot of opportunities like where the business is good but maybe management capital is constrained or something like that. But in my opinion, operating only within these companies, buying when management is buying and owning when management owns a lot is valuable because, I mean, they have so much more insight than you and mm-hmm. I would just never, I guess, sleep well if I'm doing something because I would just constantly be thinking like, what am I missing? Why isn't this management team that has money? Why are they not buying their own stock? If I think it's so undervalued and the growth potential is so high,
right?
But they don't.
So it sounds like a crucial part of your due diligence process is going out and speaking with management after you've screened them out. Am I right? Or
Yeah. I mean, of course, yeah. Also, like interviewing management allows you to see some of the more like qualitative traits that you look for in a management team, like Warren Buffett talks about integrity, intelligence, things like that. And I don't think I've like perfected that skill yet, but it's definitely very valuable to analyze how a management team goes about it.
So then from your experience, from what you've seen, or maybe from some of the companies that you have that have been winners, what are some of like the percentage of ownership that you've seen as the sweet spot, so to speak, and some of the different incentive packages that you've seen and been like, oh, this has resulted in a company going up and doing well?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest tells is management or even an outside figure buying the stock at a premium to existing prices, because that really implies some sort of external valuation analysis, something like that. And if they're willing to buy at a premium, that means they actually think the value of the company is higher than the amount they're buying it. And I think that's been probably the best predictor of an near term price appreciation. But of course, that doesn't happen very often at all, because who would buy at a premium when you can buy at the open market?
Sure.
But and another thing, like the ownership percentages you're talking about, I guess there's a sweet spot. Some people like to look at like ownership relative to salary, a CEO owns 5 times his current salary in shares. But you also have to like factor in stuff like how much was he or she paid at previous jobs. Approximately what's their net worth right now. Ownership relative to net worth, I think, is a lot more valuable. But probably shouldn't go running around asking all your CEOs like how much your net worth is. But yeah, I think a lot of people are also wary of companies like in control where the management team or one person, even worse, one person owns the majority of the shares outstanding. And I think people try to avoid those situations. But in my opinion, if you can get a manager with integrity, it doesn't really matter too much how many shares they own, as long as they have and you think will continue to act with integrity. And people avoiding those kind of companies actually drives a sort of inefficiency.
What are, I mean, you probably hit on this already in when you were talking about your investing strategy, but what were some of the key things that you'd like to highlight in your articles and your posts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies a lot. Like I said, the only thing that really ties all my ideas together is this idea of aligned management incentives and like insider dynamics that I think really fit what makes me comfortable with my holdings. Mm-hmm. But I mean, yeah, everything varies. I think the key is a lot of people, like I read a lot of pitches and like some like additional analysis and stuff like that. And this is just my opinion, but a lot of the times people seem to overanalyze a lot of small things having to do with a company. And then, they'll like extrapolate really small variables and statistics and things like that. And I mean, in my opinion, this is just my investment style, but I think I like all my pitches to be simple, like something that you can say in like one sentence or two. And I mean basically all of the ideas that I like right now can be summed up as, management teams owns a lot, they're buying stock, they get paid a little. That's pretty much everything. And like the business typically checks out after that, which is always good. But like, just like try to keep it simple, I think, especially on the long side when like, there are so many unknowns. So you shouldn't be trying to predict every variable. You should just make sure that like everything aligns so that all the incentives align and everything like that for you to make money in the future.
Michael, I wanted to like also get a little bit more clarification, when you're coming up and you're getting your start, how'd you learn about like a stock screener? How did you, what were the various paths that you went down that helped you along your way? I mean, how did you even find Seeking Alpha?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, well, when I was in 8th grade, like, Yahoo Finance is the go-to, like,
right.
That's where you look at your stocks. And I think back then Seeking Alpha was still partnered with Yahoo Finance, so all the Seeking Alpha posts would just show up as headlines under the Yahoo Finance stocks. So that I mean, it wasn't that hard to find Seeking Alpha, I guess. But learning about like screeners and all these other things, it kind of involved just, I guess, digging down a bunch of rabbit holes. And whenever I saw whenever I came across like a term that I didn't understand or like a methodology that I wasn't familiar with, I just kind of Google it. And like, Investopedia is really helpful because they define like every single stock term and things like that in like kind of general detail, but it's always useful for the beginner. And like, whenever I didn't know anything, I just looked it up and I tried to understand it better because, I mean, like I said, I was really, really passionate about investing. So, I'd be willing to take the time to research all this stuff, even while like my friends were only considered with, or were like a lot of people were only concerned with like, stock goes up or down. Right.
So you touched on this also as well, when it comes to reading 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel and Peter Lynch, and also Peter Lynch. So who would you say you model your investing strategy after, both from like your learned side and then also maybe just in whoever you've come into contact with since you've gone down this path?
Yeah, I think right now at least, I mean I derived like I said, all of the insider ideas more or less from Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1, which is like a really, really good book, honestly, one of my favorites. And like that book also talks about like things that like a lot of microcap investors talk about, like, you know, being a leader in a niche market, like doing new things to create industries, like, you know, building an industry up 0 to 1. So that's the idea of the book. And you know, competition sales, it talks about everything. And like the book is supposed to talk about startups because Peter Thiel is a VC, but or a VC and like a founder and things like that, startup founder. But you know, the book a lot of the stuff pertains to microcap investing because a lot of the times microcaps are the same thing. But like, I mean, there's so many like really talented and like really helpful people just in the microcap world that that I've learned a lot from too. And I think that's another good thing about like microcaps is like, you know, anybody can go in, and there's all these people that are just, you know, willing to chat with you and things like that because, you know, they're full-time microcap investors. This is what they do, and like nothing's you know, a lot of people have been really willing to help me on my investing journey, and I think that's been like incredibly beneficial to my learning experience. Like, you know, you were talking like the people on MicroCapClub.com and things like that. I mean, it's just a great community, and like in my opinion, like the whole microcap universe is kind of like more or less like everybody knows about each other, and then it's a really, really great community, and like it's mutually beneficial, and it's really great. And yeah, I mean, I've learned so many things from so many people, like it's impossible to even name everybody.
For sure. I think I can say the same exact thing. There's just so many people. You know, so Michael, what investing experience do you look back on as key to your learning process thus far?
I think the biggest one was actually my first microcap investment. I got a little, I don't know how to say it, like arrogant or hot-headed, I guess, impulsive, I don't know, but I had invested a large portion of my money, much larger than I should have and much larger than I'd ever put in before. And this was when I was investing real money, not paper trading. My first microcap investment, I was really confident it would go up like 10 times in 2 years, and there was like no downside. And naturally, in a year, it wound up being down 60%, and I lost a very, very large amount of money. So that really, I think that first lesson really actually hit home a lot of ideas that, you know, every seasoned microcap investor already knows for fact. You know, this company was a consumer goods company, and what they had done is they had acquired like kind of a fast-growing startup that was losing a lot of money, and like they thought, you know, they could turn it around really easily. But what in fact happened was they couldn't turn around. They lost a ton of money, and then they resold the startup for I think it was like $14 or something like that back to the founders, and they wound up losing about 50% of their market cap in value from that transaction. So that really like hit home a lot of ideas from me, like, you know, like the big investment thesis with that company was that if you summed up the value of the base business that they had and the new startup that they bought, it would suddenly like equal astronomical figures. But what that analysis kind of ignored was the fact that the startup's losses when paired with the base business actually caused the whole company to be worth a lot less. And you know, like it made me realize like kind of the biggest fallacy of some of the parts theses. And then at the same time, like trust in management. Like right now, the company trades at a very low valuation, and I think part of the reason for that is that nobody really trusts this management anymore to make good capital allocation decisions because they botched that acquisition up so much. And of course, like, you know, it taught me the value of profit to a business too, and how an unprofitable business can go from, you know, a huge market potential, like lots of upside, you know, all this operating leverage you could talk about, but in the immediate term, if they're losing a ton of their market cap in cash, they're going to have to raise money or they're going to have to take some drastic action. And, you know, that's a really tough bet to make on an unprofitable company with, you know, however much potential you think it has.
Right. So, what are some of the things that you're hoping to learn more about to further you along in your investing career?
I think I mentioned this before, but one of the biggest things I think I haven't perfected, and I guess it's not possible to perfect it, but I would like to get better, is like interviewing management, like kind of skills, being able to kind of gauge like, you know, intelligence and integrity, things like that in a management team from meeting them. Because I mean, for now, I think the biggest thing I notice when I'm talking to management isn't like, oh, these guys seem very intelligent, good operators. It's more like, oh, these guys seem nice, I should buy their stock, or they seem mean, yeah, I'm probably going to sell the stock. I mean, it's not like, I just want to be able to kind of get better at that skill, get better at analyzing the factors that matter, and identifying, you know, a good management team from bad just by talking to them. Which you know, other people a lot talk about, like, you know, these kind of tells that you get when you're talking to them, like subtle tells and things like that, that gives you hints at, like, you know, things that they aren't exactly saying but they're kind of implying with body language and just stuff like that. I mean, I think it's very valuable, and I definitely don't think that I've mastered it yet.
I mean, what have some of your mentors been saying in that regard? I'm sure they're saying it's mostly you just got to keep interviewing them as much as possible, right? I mean, it's really experience.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is like experience. It teaches you, like, you know, and it gives you a bunch of like case studies in your head too. Like, this is how the meeting went, this is how the stock did, this is how management acted when whatever happened, and things like that. So I think the more you just note and keep track of, the more you'll be able to see in the future similar events.
You know, so for where you're at, you know, in your experience in your career, you know, what are some of the things then you look for when you are asking management some questions? What type of questions do you ask them?
For the most part, and this is probably not the right way to go about it, but I ask like very specific questions when I interview management. Like I said, like, I'm really conscious of if I'm wasting a management team's time or not, and if they think that. So like, I'll do a lot of research beforehand, and then I'll just have like some very specific questions about the business and the growth strategy going forward and things like that. And like, I think a lot of people like asking general questions like, what do you see as your biggest tailwind for the next 5 years or something like that. But I mean, I think a lot of the times if you do like some in-depth research on the company beforehand, you can predict some of management's answers to those questions. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, when I'm interviewing management, it's very, very directed, specific questions.
Right. And you more or less want to ask questions that are, you kind of know the answers, and you want to just make sure that it's that, you know, when you ask it, their answer is in line with what, you know, what they've said publicly, right?
Right. Yeah, of course. Like, I think it's Mark Twain said, like, you know, it's not what you don't know, it's what you know that's not true. So that's what gets you in trouble. So I think
that's good. So Michael, you know, what is your advice then for new microcap investors that are interested in the space, specifically those in high school or college?
Honestly, I think it's if you're really passionate about it and kind of want to go into this in the future. I mean, I'm definitely like not an authority. I'm just very young, so like I've done the same stuff, I'm guessing. But like, you know, really, I guess like push boundaries and like kind of do like everything you can, get all the opportunities you can. Like, you know, before I was like, and I still am like kind of introverted and shy. So like going to conferences and interviewing management teams and things like that, it wasn't something that came naturally to me. But like really pushing yourself and getting yourself out there is very valuable. And especially like getting your ideas out there, like writing stuff like on Seeking Alpha and things like that I found is very valuable, because like some of the biggest opportunities I found is like people read your ideas and they say, oh, this is good, would you be willing to like chat about this? And then like, you know, everything kind of like snowballs after that. And it's really good to get your ideas out, because a lot of people like really admire, especially young people with good ideas and like good analysis and stuff like that. And at the same time, like, you know, like I said before, like, don't be afraid to just, like, if you admire an investor or something like that, just like shoot them an email or contact them somehow and say, hey, would you be willing to chat with me? Like, you know, I'm just really interested and I'd like to get some of your ideas on microcap investing. And yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're really passionate about microcap investing, there's so many opportunities in the field. And if you're really passionate about it, you know, you're willing to take all those opportunities, despite, you know, how uncomfortable sometimes how like uncomfortable of a situation sometimes it might put you into. But yeah, I mean, it's really valuable. And of course, if you're in high school or college and interested in investing, give me a call or you know, send me a message on Twitter or Seeking Alpha or something, because I'm always willing to talk to, you know, young investors. It's really cool when I meet another investor, especially a microcap investor that's young.
Where can my audience go and find more information about you and some of your writings?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm on MicroCapClub. My pen name there is MKKLE. I don't really know how to pronounce it, so. And then I'm also on Twitter. Michael2017L is my handle, and also on Seeking Alpha, like you said, and writing is Michael Liu. So yeah, I mean, I'm always open to talking about investing and things like that. So if you're interested, I'd love to chat.
Cool, man. Well, hey, listen, Michael, thank you again for joining me on the Planet MicroCap podcast, and you have a great rest of your day, and good luck in your first year of college.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Bobby. You too.
Of course. I'll see you at a conference soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
All right.
See ya.
Yep, bye.
Thank you all for tuning in to the Planet MicroCap podcast, and thank you, Michael, again for coming on to the program. You can access the podcast by going on to stocknewsnow.com under podcast, go to podbean.com and search Planet MicroCap Podcast, or on iTunes and search Planet MicroCap Podcast. Stay tuned for the next Planet MicroCap Podcast, where we'll have our next guest to discuss all things microcap. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast, please send an email to info@snnwire.com. I'd love to hear from all of you. This podcast has been brought to you by SNN Incorporated, publishers of StockNewsNow.com, the official microcap news source, and the MicroCap Review magazine. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and thank you again for joining me on the Planet MicroCap podcast. Have a great week, everyone.